Hi everyone, this is Omer Mozaffar and I'm here to speak to you today about Jason Reitman's movie Up in the Air. Up in the Air features George Clooney in the role of Ryan Bingham, and the movie continues the same premise that we find in other Jason Reitman movies, where the central character plays the exact inverse, the exact opposite of what we consider to be wholesome, normal, acceptable behavior in our view, our idealistic view of American society. Now, I have to take a moment and mention that our idealistic, our romantic notion of American society is itself often a creation of Hollywood movies and TV. And Jason Reitman obviously knows this, and in the process he provides us with some biting social commentary, packaged at times in warmth, packaged at times in humor, and packaged at times in melancholy. Now, in this film, George Clooney plays an employee of a corporation that is outsourced to fire people. George Clooney is hired to fire people. And he seems to take his work seriously to the point that he seems to treat his clients with dignity. But you have to ask if his dignity is something substantial or if in fact it's nothing more than a means to an ends. Because as soon as his clients leave the office, he doesn't really seem to care about them. He doesn't seem to care about their well-being, except for those few moments he's sitting across the table from them. And in the process, George Clooney does something that many of us do with our lives. When we live our lives, when we move deeper and deeper into our lives, we put ourselves into these bubbles, these tighter and tighter bubbles, where the rest of the world is out of sight and out of mind. Now, George Clooney does the same thing, but he takes it to its logical conclusion, something that we do not necessarily do. And that is that he identifies a particular goal, a particular tangible goal in his life, and that in this case would be the frequent flyer miles. And anything that does not help him to achieve that goal, anything that might even be an obstacle to that goal, he erases from his life. He no longer cares about them. He has a family that he does not pay attention to. His coworkers, we don't even know if he knows their names, except in that they can help him in his work, except in that they can help him in his miles. Now, that poses a problem. George Clooney, the character, is human. And Tom Dark has commented to me on the Roger Ebert blog that he learned this term from Islamic tradition, insan. Insan translates commonly as human in Arabic and Persian and Urdu and other languages. But more accurately, deeper than that, one of the meanings of insan is the one who needs intimacy, the one who needs interaction. By humans in this outlook, we by design need intimacy, we by design need interaction. And George Clooney fulfills that need with these fleeting, flirting relationships. And this is where Vera Farmiga enters into the picture. She provides a perfect foil to him, a perfect mirror to him in this relationship where they seem to be mirror images of each other, wanting the same thing, wanting this temporary, fleeting relationship from each other. Now, the other aspect that we often have to face in life that George Clooney faces here is the aspect of change. We all give ourselves these slogans that change is constant, the only constant is change. But when it's time to face change, it is not necessarily easy. So George Clooney has to face this in Anna Kendrick. She is a brand new college graduate. She is full of energy, full of excitement, full of wonderful ideas, and she invades his turf. She offers a program for her employer that will mean that George Clooney cannot fulfill his goals for his frequent flyer miles. So to help the process, his boss assigns George Clooney to become her mentor. Now think about it. She has invaded his personal space. Each and every one of us has personal space. We have manners and rules, unwritten rules, on how someone is allowed to enter our personal space. And if someone enters our personal space without following those rules, then we feel violated. And this is exactly what is happening with George Clooney. That in one aspect, Vera Farmiga, in one aspect, Anna Kendrick is violating his personal space. And in another aspect, he is offering his personal space to Vera Farmiga. And that launches this very interesting story. In some ways, the story is predictable, but intentionally so, but more often than not, in the key moments of the story takes directions that are not cliched. The story takes directions that are, in fact, the opposite of what we would expect. And that's part of the joy of this film. It is a more mature outing compared to the previous films by Jason Reitman. It still continues those themes of maturity. It continues those themes of loyalty. George Clooney keeps telling us in the film that loyalty is not cheap. And it also continues this question of relationships. Do you in this relationship feel the same thing that I feel in this relationship? Have you invested the same goals in this relationship as I have in this relationship? And that's one of the questions that we find, for example, in Thank You for Smoking, and that is one of the questions that we find in this movie. And the answer at times is interesting, and the answer at times is also painful. So with that, I have to really applaud this movie. I really enjoyed this movie. And I actually have to take an additional moment to applaud a few more aspects of the film. First and foremost, the editing of the film. Dana Glauberman has done an amazing job in editing in this film. In some aspects, it's very much like Juno, where time is illustrated, the passage of time is illustrated here by George Clooney visiting newer and newer cities. Whereas in Juno, for example, the passage of time is illustrated by these title cards indicating the seasons of the year. I also have to express a moment of appreciation for the opening credit sequences. Jason Reitman is one of the few who seem to really put a lot of effort into making the opening credit sequences not only a real introduction to the film, but also a works of art on their own. He did this in Thank You for Smoking, he did this in Juno, and he does it here, although it's much more subdued here in Up in the Air. The last person that I can remember who invests this much effort in such exciting, interesting, compelling opening credit sequences would be Spike Lee in That Peak, where he's moving from Do the Right Thing to Mo Better Blues to Jungle Fever to Malcolm X. These are some awesome opening credit sequences. And that only enhances the experience. And on a side note, I should also comment on George Clooney. Jason Reitman, we've witnessed his progression. George Clooney, as we know, also has his own progression in films where he sometimes will have a crowd pleaser and sometimes he'll have these socially conscious movies. This movie is a very socially conscious movie, perhaps more than being a crowd pleaser. This movie reminds me most of Michael Clayton, where in that film, Michael Clayton was someone who is taking the rubble of his life, the rubble that he's turned his life into, and he's trying to glue it all back together and hopefully find some redemption in the process. This film is sort of the opposite, where George Clooney has tied his whole life really tightly together, and now he's beginning to loosen it up to let other people into his life. So it works really well with Michael Clayton in that aspect. And so that I have to express that I appreciate this film. As a Muslim, I have to also make another point. Over the course of the past few weeks, I've developed quite a small following of conservatively minded Muslims who are going to ask me specifically to address one issue in the film. And that is, as I mentioned before, wholesomeness, morality. This film has nudity, this movie has language. Now, I don't know of a way to address these issues consistently. I can speak about nudity in films, I can speak about sensuality in films, but I don't know how to do it without becoming inconsistent from movie to movie to movie. For example, we have similar issues in Avatar, we have similar issues especially in the 5 Deadly Venoms. So is one better than the other? I don't have an answer for that for you yet, but it's something that I'm working on. So it's something that I will perhaps address in the future, but not now. But the reason I'm raising this point is because, like that issue that many of us who are socially conservative are facing, the movie itself challenges you to look at issues that are the exact opposite of what we consider to be socially acceptable or socially conservative. So it's something to think about, but it's something that I don't have an answer for. But aside from that, I really want to express my appreciation of this film. In many ways, this film expresses a mirror of my own experiences. I often have to travel around the country and give speeches in different cities and different states, and you begin to develop a different outlook on the world. You begin to develop a different outlook on yourself. And with that, I thank you for your time. I thank you again, Roger, for providing us with this wonderful forum, this wonderful place of exchange. And I ask you again to take a look at the reviews of all of my colleagues on this blog. And have a great day.